Sure.
So, hello everyone.
let
Very welcome to Radio Sophia. And Radio Sophia is basically a virtual platform to host academic and non-academic discussions on socio-economic and political issues in India and abroad. And it mainly aims to take some of these fascinating debates which happen inside the classroom to outside the classroom, and also expose the general public to some of these debates. And I am Kranti Nanduri, coordinator of Radio Sophia, and I'll be the moderator for today's session on the topic first generation students and caste in higher education in India. So most people born in India know that caste is almost an inescapable social reality. But however, not many of us know how people belonging to different castes and class experience this social reality. So in order to share their insights and perspectives on how caste, class play a role in shaping this experience for first generation students in India, we have with us Professor Chandraya Gopani and Professor Chintala Venkatramana. A brief introduction about them. So both Dr. Chandraya Gopani and Dr. Chintala Venkatramana have obtained their MA, MPhil and PhD degrees in political science from University of Hyderabad. And Dr. Chandraya Gopani is currently an assistant professor in GB Pant Social Science Institute. And his research work mainly documents and critically analyzes caste, class, gender, regional dynamics, and complexities of the domination and subaltern resistance. He has extensively published in reputed journals, and he has also been doing extensive fieldwork in South India in general and Telugu region in specific. And Dr. Chintal Venkatramana is an assistant professor in Christ Academy Institute of Law, and he has also obtained his postdoctoral degree from University of Hyderabad in Political Science Department, and he has worked on the topic employability among first generation graduates in India. And he has also extensively published in reputed journals and has been working on different aspects related to caste in higher education. So I think we are very much privileged to have today two of these distinguished speakers to share their insights and perspectives from their observations, from their own perspectives and from their readings. So welcome both of you.
Thank you.
So maybe let's begin first with this question to give a clarification to the audience. So who are called first generation students? So Chandraya Garu, so can you go first?
Okay, so first of all, I thank Kranti Nanduri for inviting me, and also I thank Radio Sophia team. It's really good initiative, and because particularly in institutions like IITs, IIMs, these kind of intervention always have a greater impact. It will have a qualitative change. So with that direction, I feel very happy for your entire team initiating on very important social issues which are very important to the contemporary Indian society. So I'm very thankful. I could also see Professor Sukumar Anna from Delhi University. So his presence really encourages us to share some of the things because he has been working on the same issues for a long time. With this, I think our title itself, three things are there. One, first generation students, caste, and higher education. So these are interrelated in many sense. One, because the general notion of first generation students, it's in European and in developed countries sense, the first generation students are the students who come from a family, the family in which parents are graduated at least. So they are called, when they come to the university, they are called as first generation students. But in my understanding, I think in Indian context, at least in South Asian context, in African context, I think we have to see in a much more complex way. Particularly given our Indian caste structure, we have to be very very particular in understanding this first generation students' life, because to So therefore, I have to emphasize some historical facts, thereby it has some ground to what we are going to discuss further. Say in India, education for centuries was denied for the majority of the population in this country, whether we like it or not. Not only higher education, it is also education, idea of education itself is denied for centuries for the majority of the population in this country, and including women. So after many struggles, the Shudra, Adishudra, now today we call Dalits, OBCs, even women also, after many people's struggles, we are able to see some presence of these communities in institutions. And after a lot of struggles, you could see some presence in higher education. So therefore, understanding first generation students, we have to understand with the background of the what is the caste structure in India, how caste structure denied the education, how it is denied to the various sections, and particularly three things in caste structure become they denied. One, education, property, and power. And Dalits, I think Shudra communities, OBC communities, these are three things are importantly which have a large impact on everyday survival in their future. So they have denied. So therefore, take for if you go by the traditional understanding first generation students, so the students, those parents are at least completed graduation. I think that will have I think that will not help us to understand in Indian context. Take for example my own experience. So I come from a family, a rural family from the Dalit background. In my family, in my not only my parents, my grandparents never studied, they are illiterate. Not only in not only my family, my entire community was not studied, they are illiterate in my village. Not only my community in my village, surrounding, I think almost I know more than 20 villages, my community people are not studied. So how do you understand this experience? So I came to the university, completed my PhD. Now I'm an assistant professor. I'm just trying to bring to your attention that in Indian context, I think we have to understand. If this is the situation of the Dalits, you could imagine the Adivasis, because there are thousands of the communities who have not even seen the higher education institutions, forget about IIM and IITs, they have not seen even graduate colleges. And some of the communities, after 75 years of independent India, they have not even seen these schools, forget about higher education. So I'm just trying to bring to your attention, we have to understand when we talk about first generation, class, caste, region, language. So these are all complex issues which become very important to understand the first generation students' experience.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very good introduction to the issue. And to proceed, the next question is now, according to your observations, what are some of the key challenges faced by...
Kranti,
Yeah, yes.
Kranti.
Yes.
So why don't you simultaneously ask both speakers so that
Yes,
it will have some...
especially this question, I'm going to open it to both of you. So both of your observations, so we would like to know what are the key challenges generally faced by a first generation student to access the higher education. Now you have already presented some of the basic idea that there is a problem, but what are the specific issues that they face is what we would like to know. And both of you can go one after the other. Venkatramana garu, so can you start first?
I think on first question, Venkatramana can respond.
Yeah.
then we will go for second.
Can you unmute? Venkatraman? Yes.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah.
Kranti, can you just read out the first question?
So the first question I asked was, who are these first generation students? Who do we call as first generation students? For which Chandra Garu has given an understanding. But if you would like to add some of the points, you can add. And the second question is, what are the key challenges faced by this first generation students to access higher education? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Kranti, for inviting me to speak about first generation students and about that radio.
Sophia.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Radio Sophia.
My pleasure.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to speak about it. Okay. Let me just share with you a couple of experiences in my life because I'm also a first generation graduate from a hilly rural village in Andhra Pradesh. Till graduation, I never studied in a college because both SSC, plus 2 and graduation I have completed through distance mode due to my family restrictions. Recently, I have attended assistant professor interview in Benares Hindu University just the 3 months back. Vice Chancellor asked me very interesting question about this regarding first generation. Why should first generation graduates should be given preference when compared to their counterparts? When both of them have the Google in their hand, both of them have the information. There is no discrimination. Google never discriminates whether he is a first generation student or non-first generation student. Why he should be given more preference? But successfully finishing the interviews is one of the biggest challenge for a first generation graduates, students, because of the low academic self-esteem, because of their family backgrounds. They never tried to speak in a formal interviews. Then I just, with high respect, I just told him, sir, in the same class, all the, say for example, if the class is 40 students, all the students are given the same textbook. Why each student gets different marks? There is a difference. Everybody has Google in their hand. But in terms of accessing the information, properly using the information, proper suggestions are given by the parents, this matters a lot. You cannot say that whoever has a Google in their hand will be used properly by the same everyone. But of course, I was not selected in that position. That is what I wanted to share with you. This is how the mindset of the recruitment boards. I have so far attended 33 ever since I have completed my PhD in 2015. I have been attending interviews across the India, especially central universities and private universities. The present one recently, just 1 month back, I got this Christ Institute. Before that, I have been attending interviews. The major problem, being as a first generation, I have been facing is the low academic self-esteem, the timidness. It is not very easy to overcome that confidence, self-confidence, because of the questions the opposite people ask. Let me share another example. When I first entered in the Hyderabad Central University, I felt like a stranger in the paradise. The universities look like a paradise, but I feel like nowhere I'm connected with any, whether it is a culture. I don't know how to speak with the teachers. I don't know how to interact with my own students, friends, and whatever the teachers taught me during my masters. Most of the teachers used to teach me in passive voice, of course in English, but passive voice. They used to show their linguistic abilities instead of subject. So I could not understand any of my postgraduate teachers. So whatever I understood from my university experience, I used to depend on Google, mostly YouTube video lectures, and I used to get the clarifications from my own student friends and my seniors like Sukumar sir, Chandraya Anna, and some of them. So as far as teachers are concerned, no teacher is able to teach me that is very easy to grasp by the first generation student. Because of main reason behind this is, among the 20 faculty members, no, I don't think so that not except one or two, 98% of the faculty members belongs to non-first generation backgrounds. They don't really understand the problems of the first generation, whatever first generation students are facing. As far as the definition is concerned, yes, first generation community or first generation students, first generation graduates, these concepts are not new. For the last 50 years, a lot of research that is being done in Western countries, especially United States. As far as the definition is concerned, of course, their definition of first generation student is entirely different from what we are giving. Nobody, as far as India is concerned, so far, there is no substantial research that has been done on first generation community. This particular concept is not being theorized. Even a government agencies also not properly trying to identify the statistics about who are the first generation, how they are different from others. So in Western countries, the definition is, as Chandraya sir said, those children whose parents have not completed their university degrees. So they are considered to be as a first generation students. The parental education is the main criteria as far as first generation community is concerned. So based on the parental education, American governments grants fellowships, loans, and some kind of privileges based on the parental education. But still, this area is not as bigger as race, caste, and all, because there is no theoretical moral justifications about the first generation community. Whereas nowhere in India, in the literature also, you can't see anywhere in Indian literature, both academic literature or government reports, the first generation community is definition. You can never see. Based on the Western definition, I try to define in my report. I have submitted a little report on first generation graduates and their employability. So what would they do once they finish their graduation? So my definition of first generation is those students whose parents did not even know how to write their own names in their own mother tongue. First comes under first generation students. Due to lack of parental education, these students are facing enormous difficulties in terms of access the information, in terms of awareness by the parents, in terms of motivation by the parents, in terms of all the criteria. First generation students, especially from rural villages, they are facing a lot of confusions. Most of the 90% of the first generation graduates, they are not properly entering into the higher education based on their choice of the course, because of the non-availability of the educated parents, non-availability of the proper suggestions by the at least siblings. Most of the first generations siblings are either not literate or semi-literate and doing like drivers, conductors, some mechanics, hardly one or two one only in the family who used to come till the till the graduation. This is how the first generation students have been facing this kind of experience, the problems.
Sorry, Venkatramana garu, can you be a little louder? There is a comment saying they are not able to hear you well. Maybe you can put your microphone a little closer to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I agree with Venkatramana on many points, because he clearly brought some experiences which are true in my observation, also in my own experience, because generally economical problems are very important, because most of the families, particularly, again I am trying to emphasize, caste hierarchy become a foundation through which the economic structures operate throughout India. So therefore, economy and caste become integrated. You can't separate in any sense. So again, the families of the Dalits, even OBCs, particularly even Adivasis, for them, economical problems become very, very important. That become a major obstacle to enter into higher education institutions. Second, precisely because of their cultural background also, because of their the caste background also. The second is lack of guidance also, because most of the time after intermediate, after graduation, so what kind of courses one can choose and what will be the career is not properly guided, precisely because the family is also not familiar, they are not educated, therefore they don't know. So therefore the lack of guidance become also one of the obstacle for the many students, particularly from the marginalized communities. This third one is a lack of accessibility of the institutions. Are you able to listen me?
Yes. We are able to hear. Yes.
Okay. So the third is lack of accessibility of the institutions. Because imagine a situation, Adivasis, a Gond tribal community students wants to study in graduation. So there are no graduate colleges near to their locality. And for them, coming to the cities is entirely a new world altogether. So even if this lack of institutional accessibility is also one of the very important dimension one has to understand. So the fourth one is, even if they come through many struggles and enter into higher education, sustaining an higher education is one of the big challenge. It's an everyday challenge. Sustaining in universities, colleges is become very challenges because of many issues. And what Ramana was saying, I also bring to your notice that because most of the marginalized communities, particularly Dalits, even OBCs, I also would refer the minorities, particularly in minorities, the upper caste who have converted into Christianity, and upper layer of Muslims, excluding them. If you take the converted Dalit Christians, if you see the status of the converted Muslims, the lower Muslims, Paspanda Muslims, you will clearly understand their life. If you see their representation in universities, IITs, IIMs, it is very low. And if you see the Christianity minority students, they are largely from the upper caste who have converted into different religions. So what I am trying to bring to your attention is, one for the major problem is one I already told, economical problems. Even if they are able to manage the economical problems, I tell you, there are incidents where their parents sold their gold, whatever little they have saved. There are cases where they have sold their land, whatever little land they had, to send their children to the universities. Because I tell you, in my own experience, when I went to the graduation college in Kurnool, Silver Jubilee, to pay my fee, although it is a government college, to pay minimum fee, one of my brother was working under a Reddy in my village, precisely because to send me to study in the graduation college. So what I'm trying to bring to your attention is, the Dalit families, OBC families, if they are able to send their children, sustaining in the campus, universities, higher education institutions become very, very challenging, precisely because one, understanding subject, precisely because of language. Because in the universities, central universities, of course in local universities, one can manage, there are different kind of problems again. In central universities, IITs, IIMs, so-called meritorious universities, their structure is such that they exclude the people who come from the rural, who come from the marginalized. So they are claimed to be meritorious in terms of what nobody questions. So I tell you, Venkatramana, same experience. I came to University of Hyderabad for MA Political Science. So I didn't understand, since I come from the vernacular language, their classes are in English, that too English which is targeted to reach the already elite students. So your presence doesn't make any sense in the class. So you are there, but still you are excluded. So the presence of absence, I think, is the experience of thousands of the students who come from the marginalized communities. The presence of the absence of the marginalized students in the class is a site for learning many things. And language question. The third is subject also, because the material that they give, which is we are not familiar, and going to library, searching them, and we didn't have any laptop. Forget about laptop. We didn't know how to search in Google. My own MA experience, I tell you, in my class, there were students from Northeast, there were students from Bangalore, there were students from Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and all that. So being a person who come from rural background, Dalit family, and I didn't know the English. So I come from the BCom because I didn't understand the political subjects, political science subjects. So it was very hard. I think for 6 months, I think sustaining for beginning of the 6 months is the biggest challenge in our entire higher education life. And because of communicating English, I didn't communicate at all with anybody for 6 months. Because how do I communicate with the Northeast students who do not know Telugu language? I only know Telugu during my MA. So that means your relationships already, bounded because of language. So how do I communicate with the Kazakhstan students or Mongolia students? So my relations, my world is already bounded because of my language. So it's almost 6 months over, and getting and there are faculties almost, because precisely because I also bring to your attention, they're not only faculties, not only it's a story of majority of the departments. It's not a story, it's not about any particular department. It's a story I have seen in JNU, I have seen in many universities. This is a story because since I was a student leader in University of Hyderabad, running a Bojan student friend during my student days, because I could able to listen many stories of my friends coming from the same background. So faculties are not only from they are not only from first generation, they belong to certain cultural communities that make them to behave in such a insensitive way. Not even if they are first generation, I don't think so they will be more sensitive. I am just I am not denying the fact that there will not be a sensitive persons. There will be definitely in every community from every region there will be sensitive persons. But the point is the entire higher education from colonial period to now, you can take statistics. I think it's very clear on UGC website and other private research. From colonial period to now, I think higher education largely hegemonized by the upper caste, and for long time male. So precise in each department, you could find 90% of the faculty come from only same communities. How it is possible? And 90% of faculty come from a same communities, social background. You can imagine what kind of classes one can have, what kind of diversity that they will teach. I think so the diversity among the faculty is very, 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 very important. That is lacking throughout Indian higher education institutions, particularly central universities, IITs. I think IITs, IIMs is worst case.
Yes.
That's a worst case. I think one has to be very, because can you imagine after having a reservation from the 75 years of independent India, some of the institutions, they do not have even 5% representation. Now, what kind of diversity you could see? Not even having a 5% representation clearly indicate the hegemony of the higher education institutions that directly have a consequences on students. And there are many students from the marginalized communities, they do not get supervisors, even if they come to the research field, and they become a dropouts. Even if they wait, because take the percentage of the OBC faculties in entire central universities. I think it's very, very, I think very low representation. So what I'm trying to bring to your attention, diversity, lack of diversity among the faculty is directly influence on the marginalized community students and their presence on the on campuses.
Right. I think this. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I could see, you could see why there are many dropouts from the OBC, Dalits communities. If you take the statistics, how many of them they have dropped their PhDs, you will certainly find majority of the from students from these communities. Why? Why? Because one has to explain it. I think in some of the campus, they become a mad. They can't go to the home. They are first generation. What they will explain to their parents? I think if you read this Anup Kumar, she documented death of merit on suicides, and many people documented Sukumarana and other people also. In the context of Rohit Vemla, then many studies came. You could see many dropouts, not only from, I think it will be a more phenomena in IIMs and IITs. Nobody is paying attention, but I could see some, I could get a sense. So the dropout, one has to understand with the, the kind of problems that I explained.
So
I also bring to your attention some of the cultural sides.
Yes, so this is where my question is actually now, since we have been talking about interaction of Dalit students with their peers. So I think if both of you can also sort of elaborate on what are the, like you said, cultural interaction in terms of with your peers, what are your challenges? I think that would be further more interesting. Please.
Take for example, freshers party. In each department, in universities, generally freshers parties, farewell parties takes place. I think this is the common phenomena of every institution. And for every freshers party, farewell party, they collect money from each student has to contribute. And literally, I tell you, and some elite students in the class will fix the 500 rupees each candidate has to contribute. And it become a responsibility of each candidate, because the elite within the class have a kind of hegemony in leading the class. I think this is my own experience, because in every class, elite and upper caste have a sense that they will in the lead, and all will be dancing. So others has to dance. So others has to be something else, not in the leadership. So they will fix how much money has to be given each candidate. And sometimes it is very difficult to pay money that they fix. And just if you don't contribute, you are already excluded from the whole interaction. You are nowhere. If you don't involve in the functions where there is a greater interaction, there is an informal way of talking, sitting, sharing, I think you will lose your opportunity. There are many cases, sometimes many friends, they have not contributed, not participated in the farewell and freshers parties. I bring to your attention that there are birthday parties. Generally, in every class, friends celebrate birthday parties. I tell you, in each month, 1 or 2 birthdays comes. To contributing birthdays, it will become difficult. If you don't contribute to one birthday, at least second birthday you have to contribute. I'm just bringing to your attention a smaller things. Without contributing, how many times you will attend? You can't attend more than 2, 1. So your interaction where the closeness usually takes place with the other students is curtailed. And because there are many, I tell you, in freshers party or farewell parties, generally rural students, they have their own way of dancing, for folk songs, for different kind of, because generally, largely their performances are not welcomed the way the upper caste students' performances are welcomed. I am just bringing how the exclusion is structured. So in such a way, so those who speak good English, they become what we call, they are the, you know, they are the people. So they are the people who invite the speakers. They will be on the stage. Those who speak good English, those who have a well dressed, those who have a body language. What does it mean to see a good language, good behavior, good dress, good body language? That means already some people are excluded.
Chintala Venkatramana garu, so do you want to add some of your experiences in this regard?
Yeah, the similar experiences what Chandraya shared. I also got the similar experiences. I used to be away with those parties because of two reasons. One, the freshers party, because out of 40 students in my PG, nearly 30 students are non-first generation students. Only 7, I think, are first generation students. Truly, they belongs to all the communities. 4 are from SC, ST, and 2 are from Delhi. And out of that 30 students, all the categories used to contribute, in both non-first generation students across the category, across the caste. Even the Dalit elite students used to be joined with upper caste students, and they used to, the contribution will be decided by the non-first generation students, and contribution will be 1,000 rupees. So we 7 people cutting across the caste used to sit together and used to criticize the decisions by those non-first generation counterparts. So how could they decide 1,000 rupees? 1,000 rupees means 3 months pocket money for all of us. How to give? If we don't give, then how can we go shamelessly? Whether we should go or not? How to interact? There is a bundle of questions. Who will answer those questions? We used to question ourselves. We used to answer ourselves. We used to contribute at any cost because it is a class freshers party. The same thing happens in the case of birthday parties. After first generation students attended 1 or 2 birthday parties, they started criticizing them. This is just acting only. There is no real love and affection. Nothing is there. We don't need to attend. Every month, 1 or 2 birthday parties, contribution, cake. This is a new culture for us. We don't have that cake culture. We don't have even birth. I don't know what is my birthday. My parents, since my parents are illiterate, they did not write my birth date. Then I have to celebrate my fake birthday. Why should I celebrate? It's a kind of the war is a kind of war between fact, truth and false. They used to say no, you have to celebrate even if it is fake. Then how can I? It's not a real. This kind of kind of pains used to be expressed by first generation graduates. And one more experience, a unique experience I would like to share with you regarding the cultural indifference. That classroom, teacher obviously used to teach in a passive voice. So except these 7 students, all students used to ask questions, used to participate in class, many questions and many doubts. They used to laugh. So we have to laugh artificially because we did not understand what he said, whatever the basics in political science. Then immediately we used to go and Google it, YouTube. So we used to open Harvard University, Yale University, online video classes, and we used to listen, and they are very easy. Even some of the professors in Harvard or Yale universities are Nobel laureates. Their teaching is very easy to understand when compared to our own teachers. Our own teachers used to teach, as I said, in a passive voice. Their teachers used to teach in an active voice with a simple language, with complex theories. So that is how I started, thinking about why these students are different from them. What is the uniqueness behind this? Whether it is caste? No, because even the elite students, even the Dalit students are also there in the elite group. It is not the caste. Gender? No, both male and female are there in that group. And race? No. Urban and rural? To some extent, yes. Then I started observing, no, there is something unique is there behind these differences. That is parental education. That too from rural villages. Though even till today, my own batch, PG batch students, even after nearly 12 years of finishing my post graduation, these 7 students are, still not settled with a proper employment because of all these cultural reasons only. Our parents did not know how to guide us, and we did not know how to approach our teachers, and they did not know how to, teach us. So here the complete cultural differences, played a major role. We don't know how to speak in the interviews. That is the main reason why I failed in more than 30 interviews, despite having all the qualifications. One of the interesting experience I would like to share with you. After finishing 30 interviews, I frustrated and I asked one of the known professor, sir, what is the reason behind my repeated failures? Why I am not getting proper job, despite having net to be PhD, even PDF. I have even visited 5 countries. I presented my papers in international conferences, and I even published 10 articles. Why I am not getting, sir? Where I am making mistake? I am unable to. Nobody is there to guide me, sir. You please tell me. Then he told me, there is one difference you have. In interview board, they at the starting level for assistant professor positions, they look at you whether you can manage the class or not. What you have in your mind in terms of subject, they don't require. Whether you can manage the class or not, that is what they want. They don't bother about whether you can teach the class, whether you have the substance or not. What is the manageability means? Speaking English non-stop. Like that. Okay, this guy can manage. Okay, we can select him. This is how first generation candidates, especially after their graduation, they are struggling like anything in getting proper employment, even in private sector. They also want how to manage, whether it is class or customer, anything. We don't know how to manage. Whatever we have in our mind, we can speak out. We don't know how to conceal the truth. We don't know how to manage diplomatic lip business and all that. It's not that we are too honest. We are not trained. We need somebody who can train this. You don't know how to manage. You can teach. That is not what they want. They want somebody who can manage the class. This is how we have been struggling for the last, I think 30. It is estimated that even till today, more than 60% of the students now who are studying their graduation belongs to first generation families.
Certainly. I think both of your accounts have very well elaborated and explained to us how these multiple complexities are challenging the first generation students, first in entering the education institutions itself, and 2, once they enter, how to cope and sustain, and then come out confidently acquiring certain skills and then be employable. So now that we have around 10 more minutes left, I would like to ask both of you, what do you think needs to be done at 3 levels? 1, probably at the policy level, like education policy level. Next, 2, at the institution, like education institution level. And 3, at the student level. Now that you have been in institutions where student movements, also student activism has also been quite rigorous or quite vibrant. So I think different levels, certain things you must have felt will be helpful, you know, for the students who are entering this institution. So if you can both take 5 minutes each and elaborate to us, it will be good. Chandraya garu, you can go first. And
so I think, yeah. So there are many issues that we brought, sustaining, because in higher education, one at student level, for students level, I think that's where one student has to be supported in terms of material condition, financial support. The second, I think we have to sensitize the faculties, because generally the tendency is many of them they focus on students. Mentoring, who requires mentoring? Of course, students need mentoring, but faculty also need to be counseled. It's not that only counseling for students. Faculty should also be counseled. I think that's where diversity among the faculty is very important. That at policy level they have not they have failed 100%. Diversity has to be ensured among the faculty in each department, in each institutions, so that it will have a qualitative change. The second, the implementation of the at least reservations, because I tell you, if there are no reservations, I think SC, ST, OBCs, their presence will not take place in the institutions. While there are reservations, their presence is not there. Imagine if there are no reservations. Can you imagine after 75 years of independence India, institutions are not even implementing reservation which are constitutionally mandatory. If there are no reservation, can you imagine their life? 99% reservations are the source for representation for these communities. I think policy level, a full representation to be ensured through reservation, beyond reservation, both for the students as well as the faculty level. I think second point is students organizations, because there are many different opinions on students organizations. But in my own sense, there are students organizations helps a lot first generation students. It gives a moral support to the first generation students. I tell you, I'm in my own experience when I was running a student organization, and I listened many stories directly, indirectly, many people I interacted. So a student organization helps directly, indirectly. I think it is very important. I think in IITs, IIMs, I don't know how the first generation students, the marginalized communities, where do they go and tell their stories, their suffering, their exclusion, their experiences? Either they have to drop out or they have to be mentally suffering throughout their course. There is no way in which they can express. They can't express to their faculties. But I think we have to understand the role of the, particularly for the marginalized communities, the Ambedkarite organization, the Alice organization, Bohujan students organizations, they are helping. If there are no organization, I think there will be more dropouts, more crisis to the representation of the marginalized communities on the higher education institutions. So the fourth one is, I think there is no, in terms of employment, because if you read some of the Ashwini Deshpande, Thorat studies, the placement of campus placements, because the studies clearly shows that the marginalized communities, Dalits, even minority students, get less opportunities within the campus. Why? Post-campus opportunities also very less. Ashwini Deshpande study clearly established the kind of networks that works lacking, that networks do not have to these marginalized communities. So in terms of employment also, yes, there is also many challenges. My own sense is, I think higher education has to be qualitatively democratized, both in terms of syllabus. I think all the courses, social science, humanities, particularly in sciences, we have a less discussion on sciences. What happens in lab? We don't know. Many people in chemistry, physics, mathematics, and many stories we don't listen. Particularly science students suffer a lot, because at least in social science and humanities we are able to articulate. There is some considerable discussion. But science students, they share because of many constraints that are there within the departments and labs. I tell you one story, that one student, Dalit student, was there in the lab and successfully experimented. He got a result. No, so his friends was commented on his result that luckily you got. So when a Dalit students get a result, it became a luck. When they get, it become a merit. It become a hard work. And see how they interpret the result itself. If a single student is there in the lab from the Dalit community or marginalized community, you can imagine. If it is a girl, I think first generation girl students' experiences, we have to deeply listen. Particularly because I'm not comparing the upper caste first generation's women experience and Dalit first generation women experiences are not same in any sense. But still, first generation women student experiences are very, very important. So most of the times they suffer a lot for higher education, particularly. But from the Dalit background, some imply family backgrounds, girls comes, but when they enter into institutions, compared to the female male students, girls come from little bit implies an urban background, but there are students, Dalit women students come from rural background also. But their stories are very important in order to understand first generation students' experience in its holistic framework. So therefore, there should be many policy level interventions from the institution side and government side, and let there be a continuous discussion, reporting, studying them, institutional exclusion, help us to bring some change.
Thank you very much. Venkatramana Garu, if you can also add
Yeah,
some
yeah,
points
yeah.
after your
Yes.
talk, after your points, we will take some questions from the audience. Okay.
Sorry, I won't take more than 5 minutes.
No, it's
It's
okay.
already
Yeah.
1 hour is over.
Yeah.
Yeah, according to me, there should be 3 kinds of things I would like to suggest as far as first generation community is concerned. One is at academic level, the concept of first generation community should be theorized, because anything, if you don't theorize the concept, and you cannot expect at policy level. Without for any concept, like take from the gender, race, caste, first theoreticians have given moral justifications why the concept needs to be relook, needs to think about it. So there should be philosophical justifications and moral justification first, then only the other things follows. Therefore, the concept needs to be theorized first at academic and intellectual level, and the second is the concept needs to be politicized at policy level. Without nowadays everything is going on by politicization. If you don't politicize the concept, the policy makers never take into consideration. So the concept needs to be politicized as much as possible. Then only there will be a possibility of positive policies on first generation community. At third level, the market level, the concept needs to be sensitized, because the interview board people are laughing at and they says I am belongs to first generation community. What first generation? What does that mean? Can you define it? So they don't even know what is first generation. They never heard about it. Both in private sector, in government sector, the recruitment boards needs to be sensitized and needs to be given certain instructions, and in order to maintain the balance, they have to take this community into consideration. These three precise points I would like to share with you as a solution to first generation problems.
Thank you very much. I think let's go to the questions now. So first, Shailendra Kumar has a comment. Shailendra, can you unmute yourself and yeah, please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. First, thank you for this wonderful talk. I'll be very quick, maybe 30 seconds. So, to the Google question that was asked in VHU. Okay. I'm giving my 2 cents as a first generation student myself. If they said that you have all the information in Google, my answer would have been, Google can inform, but can it inspire me? Okay, so I want to highlight the role of inspiration in shaping careers, in shaping lives. So I have been doing an informal survey for last many years. Wherever I studied, IIM, XLRI, and in my engineering college, I used to ask one simple question to my juniors and to my batchmates. Who inspired you to choose this path, MBA or engineering? And invariably, most of the time, the answer would have been, oh, my cousin studied here, or my uncle studied here, or my brother-in-law studied here. Okay, that's it. One single survey question. And over these years, the conclusion I have made is that people get inspired not from some Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, they get inspired from their uncle. Okay, from their cousin, particularly in terms of making careers or choosing careers. Okay, so you don't want to become a doctor because somebody is giving a talk in Google, YouTube, that he worked hard and became a doctor. So that doesn't inspire you as much as the story of your own cousin will do. Okay, now I can't find my cousin in Google. That's the problem.
I think that's a fantastic answer, Shailendra. Shailendra is a PhD student here at IIM Calcutta. So, okay, then let's move on to the next question. 1 second. So, yeah, Sridevi Kanchala has asked how to bring faculty level diversity. She means to say more categorization in reservations. And also she has another question to Venkatramana Garu especially. What kind of change you mean to say at policy level? Do you feel that government is not taking steps towards educating people? Yeah,
Yes.
if you can respond. Yeah.
Yes. Policy level, in the sense, what I mean to tell you is the same way that we have the reservations for caste and gender-based reservations are there, caste-based reservations are there. I would like to propose reservations should be there based on the parental education. If you want to select the deserving person, if the objective of the reservation is to select the deserving person, you have to consider this parental education also one of the criteria apart from caste, class, gender and all, because there is a those students whose parents did not have parent education, they are most deprived on par with other deprivations. They're in fact they're double, triple deprivations. If they're Dalits, then they're caste deprivation. If they're Dalit women, caste to gender, and if they belongs to rural, means caste, gender and village, and then first generation, if their parents are not educated, the 4-5 layers of discrimination is there. Therefore, I would like to propose that there should be reservations based on the parental education, because then only if you can establish the social justice, apart from, if possible.
Right. Thank you. So we have N. Sukumar Garu. He likes to add a comment. So
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kranti. It's like, it's very important debate that, you have initiated, and I know both the speakers personally. They are like my brothers. I have seen them. I also studied in Hyderabad University, and what they have experienced is exactly, what this need to be documented. For the past, I think for 15 years, I am working on this issue, and I have 600 students' data, which I am trying to come out as a manuscript now. What is important of these two presentations, where I fully agree that it's a comment for both the speakers. It was excellent, given within the short time span they tried to sum up. But there are certain issues which I would like to throw, because I have almost downloaded around 250 articles related to articles, books, commentaries, narratives, many things, for my own work, which I'm doing. When it comes to Chandra, when you said that, financial support, that's a major contested domain within the educational system, where we have fellowships, but around out of 600 students whom I interacted, 540 students said that they faced problems, or 85% of the students who had access to fellowships, they faced problems with the fellowship. Okay, there are financial support, but how institutions are becoming the bottlenecks of this kind of financial support. Suppose see, now Pondicherry University came out with a wonderful idea. Wonderful, I am putting it in a quotes, not as a positive thing. That now they say that other than JRF students, they all need to come through entrance. See, and also Hyderabad University, when Rajiv Gandhi Fellowship has been introduced by Thorat, the university policy has been adopted by UGC, that now they want every university to introduce entrance tests. So financial support is a major constraint. I agree with you. And scrutinizing the faculty, that is a very important question which he raised. I'm very happy that now the question is that when new educational policy, I call it as new exclusion policy, which given 50% or more than that importance to privatization of education or universities. Now the question of reservation representation is in a big stake. So how do we address that? Now, that is one thing. Syllabus. When I introduced Dalit Bhojan Thought, Kanchalaya books has become a major controversy in Delhi University. I'm happy that you brought that issue, that the syllabus or the structure of the courses is very more important. Women students, I have I think around 200 and I think around 180 to 200 women students whom I have interviewed. Among them, there are very few first generation students. Their narratives are really vulnerable, and one needs to document it. Venkat, you made a pertinent point. I'm very happy, and you gave me a thought, food for thought. I'm no doubt that I'm working on this, this thing. But we learn things from each other. That's how I am learning. I have learned this from you. Though theorization, Chandra is more into that. I am happy. That is very important. The first generation. How do we theorize it? How do we engage with the term first generation, and how do we deconstruct the idea of merit through this first generation theorizing? This is very important. So I'm happy that, the Radio Sophia who introduced this theme, and I hope you people will continue with such these things. This is a very pertinent thing and very important, and I am happy to be part of this debate. And both my brothers, they called me, Chandraya called me brother. Venkat at one point called me sir. I said, please don't call me sir. We are brothers. Okay. So thank you so much for this, enlightened, lecture. Yeah, organizing.
Thank you very much, Sukma garu. Actually, it's been, I think your observations are very, very wonderful, and we hope to engage with you definitely in the coming time. So before moving ahead, so would you both like to add any comment on that, or otherwise I would like to take the other two comments also, and then you can collectively say your final comments. I think that would save us some time. So Anjali Rajan, again, is another PhD student from IIM Calcutta. She's written that she's a second generation student, but she still have faced several difficulties that the speakers have mentioned. So do you think considering just one generation parental education can overcome the accumulated privilege? That's one thing. And we have Mr. Harish Chiluka who would like to ask a question. Harish, if you can unmute your microphone and raise your point. Yes.
Thank you, Kranti. Is it audible?
Yes, audible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you might have recognized me. I'm your junior.
Yes.
I'm also happy to meet Chandrana after a long time.
Oh,
And,
yes.
Yeah. So it's a fantastic session, and thank you for the initiation. And I thank Radio Sophia also for making me part of this interactive session. It's very fantastic to hear views from Chandrana and Venkat Ramana garu. Okay. I would like to add few more things from psychological point of view. Okay. So because I studied in MPhil clinical psychology, I would like to add few more points. Apart from the social issues, what are the psychological issues also plays a role when it comes to the first generation students, caste, and in the higher education aspects. Okay. So there are two things, like one is entering the higher education institution, sustaining in the higher education institution, and post, after the completion of graduation, what happens to this first generation graduation students. All these things at the different levels, okay, it's a process which we need to understand. Okay, it's a journey, like from birth to the different development of the student, and how they are becoming successful, or if not successful, why they're not becoming successful. Let us, like different points mentioned by previous speakers about the lack of institutions, or lack of guidance, or lack of financial aids. These are major structural issues. Apart from these issues, what are the individual psychological factors which plays a role? Okay. For example, say that we have got admission in the prestigious institute. Say that you got admission under a reservation category. Okay, now the problem with this reservation, getting admission in the reservation category, is not being understood by all other your fellow peers, that you have come to this institute and you have joined the institute and you have the ability. So they'll be questioning your ability. Oh, your reservation. Okay, so they'll be questioning your merit. Once they question your merit, obviously that some sort of a lower self-esteem in the students. So that means even if you have the ability, but when the peers are questioning, the fellow peers who are supposed to be your support system, when they're questioning your ability, that brings down a huge psychological wound on the students, on the first generation students. And now, like different speakers mentioned, when you don't have a support system, either from the faculty side, when you don't have a support system from your fellow peers, with whom do you share your feelings? Okay, so this is a major thing which also leads to mental health issues in the first generation students, which is grossly missed, and it is most neglected aspects in the higher education institutes. Okay, even if they have some sort of a mental health issues, that is either being minimized, or it is not taken very seriously, or it will be what do you say, it will be ridiculed. Okay, what sort of a problems do we have? Aren't we facing all these problems? That means the experience as a first generation student is entirely different from the forward generation students. Okay, so some things like that, this is something which is very important topic for me, and also I like this topic. It's because this is not understood from a psychological point of view. This aspect also required a multidisciplinary approach, a political approach, from the psychological point of view, from the educational point of view. All sort of disciplines need to come to address this issue when it comes to the intervention part. No one intervention becomes a silver bullet. All the interventions need to be taken into consideration. The experiences like, for example, I do not belong here, or the nervousness to talk with the faculty members, or the lack of sense of belonging in the institute itself. Okay, like not able to connect with the institute, or not able to connect with the course itself. Though with a lot of passion they come to the education, when they are not able to connect, okay, that's where they lose the direction. Okay, so these points are not being understood either by the faculty members or by the students, and when they are performing less, they'll be always judged based upon your marks, and they do not understand why you are not performing. Or will there be any sort of reflective feedback? There will not be any reflective feedback, but there will be a very harsh criticisms when they're not performing. So that leads to and at the same time there will be also pressure from the parents, the pressure to settle, the pressure to prove themselves. It's also not just pressure to settle, but also about the performings. Like okay, if I come in the reservation, there is also a feeling for me that higher burden and responsibility to prove that okay, I'm always on par with you. When you are not having that thing, that leads to like, oh my god, I think it develops some sort of imposter syndrome. Like I think I might have come by fluke, or I think I have come by luck. Okay, if this sort of psyche develops in the students, if I believe that I have come by luck and I have come by fluke, automatically that I'm not believing in myself. That will be undermining my confidence. That will be having an effect in interacting with the faculty members, because there will be a lot of fear of authority in interacting with the faculty members, because mostly they are not friendly or student friendly in terms of interacting or in terms of guidance. Okay, and at the same time, when you look for the forward generation students, they'll be like Venkatramana sir mentioned, the way they interact with the faculty members, it also like wonder, like how could they interact? Am I different from them, or is there something wrong with me? Okay, so these sort of questions will be arised in the students. Okay, and these questions, when they do not have a space, it becomes very difficult for them to understand these experiences. Like excellent point mentioned by Chandrana, that is that the importance of the student organizations and how it develops some sort of a companionship for you in understanding your own experiences, and also it also gives you some sort of strength for you. When there is an organization for you, you do not only discuss your problems, you also have some sort of a support system for you to discuss what could be other solutions, how can we deal with these things. Okay, and because there will be from the seniors, they'll be telling us their own experiences, that becomes the role model for the students. And when it comes to the premier institutes like IITs and IIMs and other premier institutes, where they do not lack the student organization, there the first generation students face a lot of problem. So they will be entering into the institute, but the sustaining and performance and the satisfactory level of completion of course, which is missing in the first generation students. And when that is being missed, already something developed in their mind that okay, I am not competent, or I'm for example, my competence is not being equated with the other fellow's competency, then that also undermine my confidence in facing the interviews or in facing the other next level job opportunities or next level courses. Okay, So these are all interlinked things. It's not just one specific aspect which cannot be taken isolatedly, can be understood. Okay, so it depends upon the peer group you form in the class. Okay, with the friend circle you make in the class, or else the support system you get from the class, or the guidance, especially the mentorship. Because first generation students fail to interact with the faculty members, they also fail to get the mentorship from the faculties. That is one of the serious issue. Of course, I don't know how many faculty members are ready to mentor the first generation students, but at least it both ways. One is fear, because of fear we do not approach, and second, they also do not take an initiative to come forward to help us. That creates a huge gap. Okay.
That's true. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're running out of time. But I think you have brought to table like extremely important point about the mental health and basically how you feel. So in all this process, because we certainly understand this is one sort of a struggle. So in that process, how you feel and how you compare yourself with the others, and then develop a sense of yourself. I think it's extremely important to understand, and thank you very much, Harish. And quickly, let's. I would like the speakers to address that question by Anjali, where is it one generation education, parental education, is it enough to compensate for the over-accumulated privilege? So either of you can go. Chintala, Venkatraman, you can go.
I think. Okay, so Harish, it's brought many issues which are very important. I think it requires another session to elaborate. So thank Harish. I agree, fully agree with Harish. Many points he made. Second, there are second generation students, but yet they face problems. It is true. It is true that second generation students also face problems. But the problems that face, the opportunities that they have to solve are completely different from the marginalized communities. The kind of the problems that they face, the opportunities that they have to solve, different. That's I think that we have to not differentiate, because there are upper caste students who are also first generation in one sense, because their parents may not be in the job, their parents may not studied graduation, but their relatives are studied, they are in the employees, they are in the universities, and just the network that they have, social capital that they have, helps enable them in many ways. And just saying, you have a laptop, being a second generation student, you have a laptop, you have an ATM. It makes a lot of difference. You can Google it. In your mobile, there is a net connection because you recharged it with net connection. So these are all enable you to solve immediately. So therefore, there are problems, of course, but their problems are completely different from the first generation students, that too coming from the marginalized communities, Dalits, OBCs, and other communities. So, and also, if you're a first generation student from the upper layer, elite, upper caste, institutions also mechanism where you will get a cooperation, you will get a kind of environment where you will get a support system within the department, within the school, or in universities. So I stop. And third one is, there are what Sukumar Anna was, it's really always inspiring to listen Sukumar Anna. So he has been working, his work is very important. There are support systems, but students face problems. It is true. I remember, 2007 around, when there was a RGNF fellowship, how entire campus was reacted, seen the Dalit students. I have seen, because some of us, we got the fellowships, and some of my friends, they bought good shoe, good dress, and they also purchased good mobile. And because this attracted the upper caste, look, they got money and they're spending on mobile, they're spending on shoes, dress, they are going to the restaurant, eating. I mean, just so it is I narrate one small incident. So in my case, what happened is, first thing when I got a RGNF, I purchased a laptop. That was I think because of RGNF, I purchased in my entire career first laptop with 37,000. And the second thing I have done is, intentionally with my fashion, since I was a student leader, I purchased, I think every month I spent almost 15,000 on books. So almost by the time I got the job in middle of my PhD, I spent almost 2 lakhs, more than 2 lakhs on purchasing books. So in my room, there were many books. Those who have visited my room, they used to be shocked. And this also hurted the upper caste, because I could see their reaction. So they always use, it was shocking to me, because it was shocking to them. Precisely, I purchased books, and in their imagination, and Dalits should spend on shoes rather than on books. So I reversed it. And this purchasing books also, it helped me to give some of the books to my own students who are working in organization, other friends, classmates. They usually come to my room, take books. In a way, it built relationships. And it also forced me to read and read. I mean, what I'm bringing to your attention is how a little financial assistance will bring a qualitative change. And those books, now it is literally helping in my everyday life while I'm teaching, doing research. There are many examples like this in many campuses, but people don't refer it. And they spent some money to their families. That is how they have survived in the higher education. They are the first people who have come to the universities. Their entire families depend on them. Look at the Senthil Kumar. If you read the Senthil Kumar report, entire suicide report, and you will clearly, he was the first one who was getting fellowship. Suddenly, fellowship was stopped. His entire family was in crisis. That is the life of many marginalized groups, Dalit students' life. And only thing is, we need a courage to listen them with sensitivity.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chandra.
I stop here.
Yes,
I understand.
No, that's fine. We're just running short of time. Venkatramana Garu, if you have to
I
add
won't
any
take more than 3
points quickly. Yeah.
sorry, I won't
No problem.
take more
Yeah.
than 3 or 4 minutes. I would like to answer for that problems between first generation and second generation. I'll try to give you some of my personal experiences, because the word problem is very relative. It differs from person to person. It is very difficult to define. Two of my classmates, one is first generation student. His father is a brickmaker in a village. Another one is a second generation student whose father is a teacher. Two of my, of course, both of them are Dalits. Two of my classmates got RJNF. But the way they spent the money, the first generation student spent that money to construct the toilet in his village and to conduct the marriages for two of his younger sisters. And he also used to buy books, and later he got 2 JRFs apart from by using RJNF money. And another classmate who is a second generation student, he bought a site in Semshabad, nearby Semshabad airport, because he doesn't have to spend any money in his home because his father is a teacher. He used that money for the purpose of the real estate, and the same student used the money for the purpose of his own family, for the development of the family. Yes, of course, there is a difference. Problem means even I recently read a news. The Ratan Tata, one of the Tata owner, he visited America, and he also faced kind of discrimination when he met Ford owner. There is also kind of discrimination. We can't, compare it. Say, for example, I have 10 lakhs cash and I borrowed 5 lakhs and bought a site. You have 1,000 rupees and you also borrowed 500 rupees to buy a 1 bag rice. Both are, technically you are in debts. Both of you are in debts, but they are not same. There is a difference between first generation and non-first generation in terms of problems are concerned. Another question said by Harish regarding the psychological issues. When one of my classmates presenting MPhil, he is giving a presentation on stage, all our department faculty and students were sitting. He was nervous since he is a first generation. He is giving the presentation first time in his life on the stage before his own teachers. He also came from a Telugu medium. He was little nervous and he's trying to present. And one senior professor interrupted and asked, "What are you speaking? What kind of language you're speaking?" It's like a Toli Chowki language. Toli Chowki is a place in Hyderabad where all the laborers are used to sit there. All the contractors used to come and hire, which means that you're speaking a Toli Chowki language, which has enormous psychological impact on him. On the stage, he almost cried. Unfortunately, he recovered immediately. Later he gave a big warning and all that happened. That's a different question. But such kind of psychological, pains are also have been facing by first generation students as far as psychology is concerned. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you.
I think, yeah. So thank you very much, both of you. It has been like a fascinating session, and it's also, I am feeling it's like a mini HCU congregation. So my understanding, so just to conclude the session, my understanding about caste has certainly been shaped in a large way because of my education in Hyderabad Central University. I always owe it to HCU because I feel had I not entered an institution like that, where not just that I am a social science student, but also particularly because of the strong student movements. So we have this competing ideologies, and constantly you are seeing people from different walks of life and you're interacting with them. In the classroom, you get to sit with people from different backgrounds, which do not happen in a private institution that easily. So you do not even know what their realities are. So there is a lot of people, I feel here, especially when I look at IIM Calcutta, also you do see that nobody talks about caste. So people avoid that topic because it's a sensitive issue and it might create conflict. So when you sideline the issue, you're ignoring and you're not acknowledging the social reality or the importance of the issue and the merit, because IIM is a highly meritocracy-based institute. You do see that people are struggling, but there is no support system and nobody wants to be identified. Whereas on the other hand, in HCU, you see people are vocal about their backgrounds. They're fighting, they're struggling, they're voicing for their own rights. So they're creating a support system for themselves. And in that process, the entire HCU atmosphere has changed. You are forcing. So the active social movement is forcing everybody to understand, to listen, and become sensible. Whereas that kind of space is not there in such institute because people are afraid that if you identify yourself as belonging to some community, maybe you'll not be placed, maybe you'll not be accepted among your peer group. So these issues are very, very real. And I think they need to be taken up very seriously. And with this, I would like to end and thank you very much for the active audience. And as part of Radio Sophia, we hope to conduct much more sessions of this sort. And in fact, so in one of our previous episodes, we had Raviteja Rambarki, a sociology student from HCU, who has given an excellent talk about Telugu cinema and caste. It's a Telugu talk, and where he has popular media. So how caste plays a role in popular media, maybe it might be of good interest to many of our audience today. So with this, I end this session and thank you very much for joining. And this will be uploaded to Radio Sophia YouTube channel shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.